One of the most expensive mistakes sellers can make is believing that pricing their home higher automatically gives them an advantage during negotiations. Because in today's market, overpricing often does the exact opposite. It quietly reduces buyer interest, weakens urgency, extends market time, and in many cases ultimately leads to a lower final sales price than the home may have achieved with a more strategic approach from the beginning. And we're seeing this happen more frequently as buyers become increasingly informed and more sensitive to pricing. So in this video, I want to walk you through why overpricing can backfire, and how buyers actually respond to pricing today, and why strategic positioning has become one of the most important parts of successfully selling a home in Laguna Niguel. I'm Shawn Noonan with the Noonan team at Compass, and we specialize in luxury real estate throughout Laguna Niguel, Dana Point, and the coastal communities of Southern Orange County. And one of the most common conversations we have with sellers today is, shouldn't we price higher just to leave room to negotiate? And it's a very understandable question, but the reality is today's market often responds very differently than sellers expect. On the surface, the logic sounds completely reasonable. Many sellers think if we price higher, buyers will negotiate down and we'll still end up where we want to be. And years ago, in some market environments, that approach occasionally worked more effectively because buyers had less access to information and less visibility into market trends. But today's buyers operate very differently. They can instantly compare nearby sales. They're looking at active competition. They're studying days on market and prior price reductions, price per square foot trends, and neighborhood inventory. So buyers are evaluating value much more critically than they used to. When a home enters the market priced noticeably above buyer expectations, one of two things usually happens. Either buyers skip the property entirely, or they just wait. And waiting is dangerous for sellers because momentum is incredibly important in real estate. The first 1 to 2 weeks on the market are typically when online visibility is at its highest. Buyer attention is strongest. Agents are watching closely, and motivated buyers are the most engaged. If a home misses that initial momentum window because the pricing feels disconnected from market expectations, it can become much harder to recreate that sense of urgency later. And once a listing begins sitting on the market too long, buyers naturally begin asking, why hasn't this sold? Even if the home itself is beautiful. We regularly see situations where excellent homes struggle unnecessarily simply because the pricing strategy created hesitation early in the process. One of the most important things sellers need to understand is that buyers today are extremely well educated, especially in coastal communities throughout Laguna Niguel and Dana Point, where buyers are often comparing multiple properties simultaneously. You see in neighborhoods like Laguna Sur, Niguel Summit, Palmilla, buyers are typically studying recent comparable sales, active inventory, upgrades, view orientation, privacy, lot usability, and overall presentation very carefully before making decisions. And because buyers have so much information available instantly online, homes that feel overpriced tend to lose emotional momentum very quickly. And that emotional momentum matters because buyers are not simply purchasing square footage these days. They're responding emotionally to many different things. They want lifestyle, presentation, scarcity, and perceived value within the current market. One of the biggest misconceptions in real estate is that the higher pricing creates stronger leverage. And in reality, leverage typically comes from buyer competition. And homes that are strategically positioned from the beginning often generate stronger showing activity right out of the gate. And this means greater sense of urgency for buyers, more emotional engagement, and in many cases, stronger offers right away because buyers feel they may lose the opportunity if they hesitate. And we regularly see situations where two similar homes perform very differently simply because one was positioned more thoughtfully within the market from day one. Strategic pricing is not about undervaluing a property. It's about understanding buyer psychology and positioning the home where it can generate the strongest response as quickly as possible. And this becomes especially important in the luxury markets because buyers at higher price points tend to be more analytical, they're more patient, and they're more selective. They're going to critically evaluate the view quality and the privacy and the architectural appeal. They're looking closely at renovation quality. How do the outdoor living spaces compare, and the overall lifestyle presentation very carefully. And when pricing feels disconnected from what they perceive as value, they often simply just move on to the next opportunity. That's why pricing luxury real estate requires much more nuance than simply applying a price per square foot formula or pricing above the last nearby sale. At the Noonan team, pricing is approached as part of a much larger positioning strategy. We analyze everything from comparable sales, we look at active and pending inventory, buyer demand trends, market timing, property presentation, neighborhood dynamics, and emotional buyer response, because ultimately successful outcomes are driven by how buyers react within the current market environment. The object is not simply to place the highest possible number on a listing. The object is to position your home properly and strategically so that it attracts strong buyer activity, preserves our negotiating leverage, and creates the best possible overall outcome for our clients. Now, The reality is overpricing rarely creates the advantage sellers believe it will. And in today's market, strategic positioning, buyer psychology, and presentation often have a far greater impact on the outcome of a sale than simply starting at a higher number. And in communities throughout Laguna Niguel and coastal Orange County, those early pricing decisions can dramatically influence both buyer activity and the final result. If you're considering selling and would simply like a more thoughtful understanding of how your home would likely be positioned in today's market, we're always happy to be a resource. And if you enjoy this type of content, be sure to subscribe for more Laguna Niguel real estate insights, seller strategies, and market updates.